Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Authors on the Air. I'm your host, James Latwell. And with us today, we have Clémence Michallon and her new book, Our Last Resort. We're going to talk about it today, but you're going to want to pick this up because it's an amazing read. It's the follow-up to the best-selling The Quiet Tenant that came out previously. And this is a sophomore book that doesn't let you down. So welcome, Clémence.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for having me.
No, it's a really fun read, and there's a lot of unique little twists in it that I think readers are going to get a blast out of. So maybe why don't we start with? Can you tell us just a little bit about the story in Our Last Resort?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. I really appreciate that. So, Our Last Resort tells the story of two people, Frida and Gabriel, and they travel to this very luxurious resort in the desert in Utah to repair their sibling relationship. They've sort of been out of touch for a few years and they want to have this reunion. And everything is going well, not perfectly, but well enough until on the fourth day, a female guest turns up dead, evidently murdered. And suspicion quickly falls on Gabriel, and it's not the first time that he has been accused of murder. This forces Frida to reckon with some secrets that are still buried in their past, because the thing about Frida and Gabriel is that they grew up in a cult in upstate New York. And the novel is told in two timelines. One contemporary timeline that spans just a few days at the hotel while the murder investigation plays out, and one that spans years and years, and that documents their childhood in the cult and everything that happened there.
Yeah, and you approach the cult issue a little differently than some of the books that we see now that talk about cults and escaping from cults. In Our Last Resort, Frida and Gabriel are out of the cult, and you're kind of looking back on their life and how they came to be who they are now. How did you come up with that idea and concept? Because it's really well done, and it just kind of unfolds the narrative as the story goes on.
Thank you. The reason why I had Frida and Gabriel have been people who grew up in a cult was, when I came up with a story for this book, the first thing I came up with was the location in the hotel in the desert in Utah. I think because The Quiet Tenant is set in very simple settings. It's a small town in upstate New York. It's winter, so everything is always cold. And I just wanted to change it up. And I decided to go somewhere very fabulous and also where the weather is hot. I wanted sweat on everyone's foreheads, and I just wanted new outfits and just new elements. But then I thought, well, someone's loved one, becoming accused of murder, of course it would be a problem for most everybody. But in a novel, you really do need things to be heightened. And I needed these two to have a particularly strong bond. And I thought, what would create that? And I figured a shared childhood in a cult was good material for this. So I decided to do dual timelines. But the thing is, I didn't want the dual timelines to just be a cosmetic thing. Much like when I wrote The Quiet Tenant, it's multiple points of view, but I didn't want it to be just a style exercise. I wanted the points of view to impact the plot. I wanted each person to do things that would impact the other people, etc. And I think that I applied the same thing to the dual timeline idea. I wanted what had happened in the past to inform what was going to happen in the present. And I wanted, ideally, the timelines to unfold at a pacing such that the reader would learn the right thing about the past at the right time, and it would clue them in on what was really going on in the present.
Yeah, and it does. I think we're both readers. I mean, you've read dual timelines, and it's like you almost want to skip the timeline chapter and just get back to the story. But in this one, you exactly like you said, you're releasing information at the right time for the reader to kind of get that aha moment that is going to come. So it really worked well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a big example for me and how to do this right was Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll, which
Mm.
where Jessica uses dual timelines so beautifully and with such skill, and it's exactly what I just described, right? You there's the past timeline that tells the protagonist's sort of teenage years and everything that happened in her past, and it enables you to understand the person she is now in the contemporary timeline a lot better. It is also, as I have found out, a huge challenge for from an author perspective. I went into it with a beautiful amount of naivete, I thought, and then it turns out it's really hard because you have to write the adults that would result from that childhood. You have to write the children that would grow into these adults, and you have to hold so much in your mind. It was a really interesting exercise.
Well, you survived, so
Yes.
that's a good thing.
I have white hairs now that I didn't have when I started writing the book, but I survived.
That's good to know. So how did you inform some of the cult narrative that you have in the story? I mean, without joining a cult, how did you come up with this?
So I've always been fascinated by cults since I was a kid, and I caught a bit on a news show in France where I grew up. It was one of those sort of 60 minutes type segments, and one of them featured a cult. And it was one of those things where, very much like when I learned serial killers existed, cults were something that hadn't occurred to me that they might exist. But once I found out about them, there was this feeling of, oh, of course, because they are sort of an unfortunately expected offshoot of this exercise we're all engaged in, which is trying to exist together. It's trying to exist collectively, and it's really hard, right? But there is also, the only way out is through. We have no choice. We have to exist collectively, and cults are organizations that make, that take a predatory stance on that exercise. And so I thought, oh wow, how fascinating. And I just kind of never stopped watching documentaries and listening to podcasts and reading books. There was one case which I think a lot of people might be thinking about, which was the Nexium case, which happened in the state of New York. It was the Keith Raniere case. And I watched both seasons of that documentary, The Vow, that was made using a lot of footage that was filmed from inside the cult, because they had this thing where they filmed everything.
Yeah.
And so I was really, there's also another high control group in France that led by this guy who is just a completely random person, but he claims he was visited by aliens who revealed certain things to him. He's a total self-made prophet, and this group has existed in France for decades. And I actually read a really good book by a Quebecois journalist who infiltrated this group for weeks and weeks. So there was a lot of good, source material to draw from.
Wow. Yeah. Now you mentioned, that the setting itself is such a departure from the Quiet Tenant. It's almost like 180 degrees. But and I really like the way you described how you chose the desert setting. But I understand that there was kind of a connection with this setting back to kind of your youth when you were on a trip sometime. Is that right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. When I want to say 18 years old, possibly 19, I traveled with my parents to an amazing hotel in the desert in Utah. And it was the most stunning place I have ever seen to this day. And it was magical in many respects. It was one of those places where you stepped out of your room, the mini bar refilled as though by magic. Obviously, it wasn't magic. It was people working really hard to make it happen. But it was just, and the mini bar was complimentary, which is very exciting. There was no alcohol, but just the magic of just having drinks. Everything becomes magical when it's complimentary. Anyway, so it was the most beautiful, stunning place I'd ever seen. But it was also super isolated.
Mm-hmm.
In a climate that can become threatening very quickly. And there was only one access road to get there. And we showed up in our rental car, we being me and my parents, and we passed that access road 5, 6, 7 times without seeing it. And we were losing daylight, and we thought, well, we're just going to end up at the nearest Best Western or something because we need somewhere to sleep. We're in the desert. We're like, we can't keep going forever. And finally, I kind of took the phone and got the hotel on, and we found our way in. But it was kind of interesting. So we almost never found it, so it added to the mystique of like this sort of oasis feeling of arriving. But then I remember my parents and I got into a stupid argument at one point, and it was one of those things when you vacation together, you spend a lot of time in close proximity. Something is bound to become a fight. And I remember this feeling of it was really odd. We were in this beautiful setting, but we were also stuck with one another. We couldn't get away, from one another. That's something that was this sort of idea of forced proximity was something that really powered me through the Quiet Tenant, and I think I used it here too. So when I started thinking of what to write next after the Quiet Tenant, my mind wandered back to this hotel, which was so beautiful and fun and wonderful. But also, I felt like there was a good amount of menace in that setting, and nothing tragic happened to us, but I felt like some things, like it was a fertile ground for my imagination.
Oh, yeah, it really is, and I can see from your description of that childhood resort some similarities to the fictional resort that you have in the book. But one of the things that I think you've done with the location is you've almost turned it into like a closed circle mystery where you've got a cast of characters here at this hotel, and you really develop those really well, so you can kind of pick out the personalities that as the story unfolds that you get suspicious of a couple of people, and it was really well done.
Thank you. Thank you. That's always fun to work with, right? And
Mm.
it's actually a fun style challenge for me because, I write psychological thrillers, right? I don't really write classic mysteries, but the hotel murder is more of a mystery kind of trope. So I kind of got to blend things a little bit while
Yeah.
still remaining on the psychological thriller side. You still have to build up that cast of character. Who's in the hotel, and I figured, well, there have to be some influencers because it's set in our contemporary era and it's a
Yep.
beautiful resort. So they have to be there. And there's an actor because, who's going to go to these places, there are a fair few people there. I actually had a
Yeah.
lot of fun coming up with the guests.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that being a fun exercise. Now, Frida and Gabriel in particular, I mean, they're so unique and they're so well drawn, and there's a trauma bond that they kind of share from their experience. But as you were kind of putting the story together, how did you come up with the idea to have a sibling pair instead of what we're used to seeing, a husband and wife or a wife alone on a vacation? How did you come up with the sibling idea?
That is such a good question. I think I wanted to write about family and chosen family, but I wanted to write about it in sort of this way that was separate from romantic interest. Um, which is interesting because I love domestic thrillers. I
Mhm.
actually find it really hard to write a novel or anything that doesn't deal with any amount of like infatuation or romance. The Quiet Tenant, of course, had the character of Emily, who
Mhm.
had this big crush, and so that was a big outlet for that part of my imagination. But I think I wanted to keep things between these two platonic. I've always been really enamored with stories about people who seem to need to be in each other's life, but there's no easy container for their bond,
Mhm.
right? They have to, their lives have to commingle, but there's no easy structure for them to fit into. And I love those dynamics, and that's what I wanted to explore with these adults and their sibling-like relationship that was forged in those most horrible circumstances.
Yeah, and I think it adds another layer of complexity to this relationship because there are a lot of secrets. And what is it about secrets that are just so powerful that motivate people to keep them secret and at all costs?
Well, I think a secret in a novel needs to be so big that if it were to come out, it would ruin at least one person's life, right?
Mhm.
Like those are the secrets we need in our fiction. And I think secrets are so interesting because, first of all, it's untenable. They always come to light. Very few people take their secrets completely to their grave. But also they create all these sort of conflicts of interest. You know, do I keep it? Do I not keep it? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? They also trigger some internal changes. Some people might overestimate their mileage when it comes to dealing with guilt, or when it comes to dealing with these sort of the double identity almost that comes with keeping huge secrets, which is also something I played with in the Quiet Tenant, obviously, where one of the characters is a serial killer secretly. And so I think secrets are great plot engines because they create both an external problem and an internal struggle for either the person whose secret it is or the poor soul who ends up sharing a secret they never wanted to know.
Right. No, I love that. I usually don't, quote from a book, but there's a couple of passages. I mean, it's so well written. There's a piece in here where you're talking about, Frida's memory, and it's like a mental trunk of locking secrets away. And you say that my memories are not carefully organized. My mind is not a trunk. My mind is something more dangerous with its nooks and crannies and hidden labyrinths. My mind is a beehive like any other. Approach at your own risk, poke your hand in, and feel the heat of 1,000 stings. That was just so cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, it's my pleasure. We're going to end up with something we call 3 quick hits. I want to put you in Frida's headspace and just 3 quick questions. And what would Frida say? What's Frida's favorite drink? What cocktail does she like?
Ooh. So the thing with Frida, this is not a spoiler. We come to find out that she has ended up making a bit of money,
Mhm.
So clearly, the price is no object. So I think she's definitely having a mixed drink. I think some kind of champagne cocktail,
I could see that. Yeah,
right?
that fits. How about her music? What does Frida listen to?
Ooh, I love these questions. So okay, I know the answer to this. So Frida while she has come into a bit of money, she also has fairly simple joys. And we know that one of her hobbies is she has this Fiat 500 that's a convertible, and she likes to drive it upstate on the beautiful country roads when the weather is good. And I will tell you from experience, the best music you can listen to, whatever app you use, you put it on shuffle, and the first song you play has to be California Dreaming. And if you do this, all the songs that come up after that are just amazing. Like, it just signals to your app, you like good music, bangers only. So I think she listens to that, the Mamas and the Papas, and whatever comes after, your own
Oh,
kind of music, that kind of stuff.
that's great. And then finally, what do you think Frida's greatest fear would be?
Vulnerability.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yep, I agree.
Thank you. Yeah, she's relatable in that way also, I think. That's one of the great things I wanted to say also about secrets. While hopefully most people in real life don't have crime novel secrets, it's very relatable to have a character wrestling with a secret, because we all have to kind of deal with either keeping someone else's secret or
Mhm.
just make small decisions about what we disclose about ourselves all the time. So that and her fear of vulnerability, I think, are relatable qualities.
Very true. Folks, have been talking with Clémence Michallon, and this is her latest book. Our Last Resort comes out on July 8th. You're going to want to run and grab this because I think you're going to be hearing a lot about this book this year. So, Clémence, again, congratulations. It's a wonderful book.
Thank you so much again. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for your great questions, too. This was so fun.
Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much.